Okay, hello. We're going to try to do this all in one take. My name is Nathan Voss, and this is the final blog post. This is the last post. What does that mean? Why is it happening? Is this in fact the final time that anything's ever going to be posted on my blog? Absolutely not. This is going to be one of those faux retirements that's impossible to take seriously when artists, like when Steven Soderbergh retired from filmmaking to take up a career in painting, and after a couple years of nobody caring about his paintings, he went right back to making movies. Good ones. Or Lauryn Hill or Jay-Z retiring more than once in the course of their career. That's pretty much what's happening here. But this is absolutely the end of the regular expectation of blog posts happening on a regular basis. For about the past couple of months, we've had about one story per day, and we've had one story every few days for the past 8 years. Today is June 30th, which is 8 years to the day of when I started this project in 2012. Why am I ending it? I'm ending it because I feel good about it. I wanted to create a repository of positive, truthful stories told in a way that people could easily access and remind them that there's beautiful things happening all the time around us and that um, we all experience them, but let's also write about them. Let's share them because not everyone talks or writes about these lovely things that take place. Going online, as we know from statistical analysis and research, is something that does not improve mood. It has a tendency to bring about anxiety or decreases in mood, varying in degrees based on the proportion of social media and what you're looking at. And I wanted to have a counter to some of that. Here's some of the good stuff. Another reason why we're ending this is because I don't like TV shows that go on forever and ever, gradually getting worse until nobody wants to watch them anymore. I would rather that this feels like something self contained and complete, finite, like a long film that has a beginning and an end. Immortality decreases the value of any given unit of an entity's existence, and um, I want this to feel like a complete art piece. I'm still going to post about upcoming art projects, gallery shows, etc., photography, and the occasional story. I love writing these things. But I'm in my mid 30s. I do not want to spend the prime of my life writing blog posts. I want to go outside. There's this push pull relationship that we all experience between living life versus documenting life. Both are important, but I would like to spend more time doing stuff rather than writing about doing stuff. I also um, really enjoy making books and films. And now that I've discovered that I can at a level that I'm satisfied with and incredibly thankful for that these projects have done as well as they have, I'd like to do more. I want to share with you another book if that's possible, more films. I hope that's okay. Um, and I'm grateful for the enormous and passionate level of enthusiasm for my work. Thank you. And I hope this transition from less blog, more book, not just because no one reads blogs anymore, but because there's something very exciting about books. I'm thrilled people are still using them. And of course, films, the great art medium of our time. Okay, so this story, we're doing it on video because I don't have notes for it. And the reason is because these conversations that I would have with this particular gentleman were so long and so huge, there's no way I could write it all down. You'll notice the blog stories on my website are all of a similar approximate length because that is the degree of, that's the length of material dialogue that I'm able to remember. I can't go much beyond that. My brain's not big enough. And these conversations that I would have with this guy would be enormous. They'd go on for 4 hours. Um, I don't think it's his name was Will. I don't think it's giving too much away in terms of privacy to say what his name is. I know 5 or 6 Wills on the street. This is one of them. He looked to be in his early 40s, but he's actually in his early 60s, in great shape, muscular, American black man with this big duffel bag that he carried around, had all of his belongings. He was living on the street and was missing an eye. He had this smile that intimated that he had some secret life knowledge hidden up his sleeve. He projected wisdom in the way that quiet people so often do. In a room full of people, the person who speaks the least always appears the most intelligent, and he exuded that quality as well. Like all my favorite people, he listens to life. He I get more out of listening than I do from talking, and I could sense that he was someone who put quite a bit of thought into um, how he paid attention to things around him. He'd get on and would ride, a full loop, full round trip. He'd be on my bus for half my shift. We'd be talking for 4 hours. He'd step off at the terminals to give me a chance to take my break. Super nice. And then he'd jump back on. We'd continue talking. And Will loved specifically American literature. He loved poetry. He was an artist himself. He was also an illustrator and a writer. He showed me some of his poems. They're quite good. Um, like me, he enjoyed going on long walks. He'd tell me he spending a lot of time alone, walked from Skyway to Beacon Hill, and here's how he did it, and all the stuff he thought about on the way. Um, he liked Thoreau. We talked about Walden Pond a lot, Whitman, some of the great American poets, Dickinson. And we'd be up there at the front of the bus playfully debating whether Shakespeare or Milton had the greater contribution to English literature and English language. And it was really fun to notice out of the corner of my eye what the rest of the bus was thinking as they were listening to us talking about Wallace Stevens and all these other people. Um, and we were, he was doing things in the minds of those people. A guy came up to me a couple nights after Will had been riding the bus, and he said, "Nathan, I just wanted to tell you that guy on the bus the other night. That blew my mind. I've never heard a homeless person talk about Emily Dickinson for 45 minutes. I didn't know that happened on this planet. You're expanding my understanding of what's possible and how variegated people can be." I was very excited. And sometimes black men, because Will was black, would take him up, would accost him and say, "Why are you so interested in the white man's words? Why are you turning your back on your own people?" And Will would answer to them, saying with total confidence, "Brother, what language are you speaking? We're American. We're speaking English. It's not going to do us harm to study and appreciate what the best arbiters of this language have to offer, in the sense of no one culture has a claim on all of life's answers," to quote Thomas Chatterton Williams III. Um, and Will would tell me that he used to have, of course, both eyes, but now he only had one functioning one, but he couldn't see clearly until he lost this eye. I wouldn't know what that meant for quite some time. Um, he would tell me that, you know who else is a homeless man who walked the streets without a home, getting by on the charity of others and his own resourcefulness? Jesus, the historical Jesus. Gosh, if he did that, it can't be the worst way to learn about life. Thoughts that never would have occurred to me. I never would have thought of that. And he would talk with me about difficult passengers after they had stepped off. We would talk it out together. A few months went by when Will was not on the bus. And I got word that he had been arrested and needed help with his duffel bag, his bag that contained all of his art. And I wasn't overwhelmingly surprised that he had been arrested, because I know that, as we all now know, that people get arrested more often than they should, especially black men. But I was surprised because Will fulfilled every assumption of what a law-abiding citizen is. And I, as a fellow artist, had an acute sympathy for someone on the verge of losing all of his art, the priceless nature of your writing, your drawings, your negatives, whatever it is. And the question was, coming through the channels of King County, were you interested in holding on to this person's possessions, in your home? And I was sitting there thinking about whether or not I could do that. I'm still living like a college student in a studio apartment. And do I have enough room, etc. Before I could make a decision, an operator whose opinion I trust approached me and said, Nathan, I bet you're thinking about this whole Will backpack thing, because he also asked me if I can hang on to his backpack. And before you make that decision, I think you should read this article. I said, okay. And I read the article and a number of articles like it that, um, gosh, I think I regret reading them. What they were they revealed Will to have been a person who committed a diabolically heinous crime in the early 90s. And I'm not going to tell you what this crime was, because it was so unremittingly evil, specifically in the gleeful nature in with which this inhumanity was visited by Will, allegedly, onto someone else. There is no movie or book that you have read or seen that contains this crime. It was that extreme. And I was so shocked. Could this be the Will that I know? How could this possibly? Was it one of the other Wills? I know a lot of Wills. No, it was the same Will. There's a picture of him right there wearing his prison uniform. And the article was, please report this guy's gone missing. He's incredibly dangerous for these reasons. And I was so disappointed. The timing for my being able to assist with holding on to his belongings didn't end up working out, even if I had wanted to help him, because it takes forever for this type of communication to go through the channels of interdepartmental communication in King County. Somebody else ended up taking care of the bag. But the question is really, would I have helped him and held on to his belongings if I had had the opportunity? Of course, I wish I could say, yes, I'm amazing and magnanimous and understanding and forgiving, etc., etc. But I'm not so sure that's true. I think I may have just been too scared um, and uncomfortable. I assumed that because of the nature of this crime, he would never be allowed out onto the street again. But 3 months later, there he was, getting on the bus. And he had a vindictive, resistant quality to his air that he had never before shared with me. And unlike all the other bus rides that he had ever taken with me, he did not sit at the very front seat. He went and sat somewhere else. As he stepped on, I said, hey, Will, did you get your bag okay? And he said, yeah, someone else took care of the bag. And I, as quickly as possible, as he's walking past, explained that I wasn't able to, I got the information too late. I wasn't able to help him. He said, oh, okay. And then he went and sat back there somewhere. And after everyone else had left and we're doing the Prentice loop on the tail end of the 7, he came up and I asked him if there was anything he wanted to tell me. And he said yes. And he told me 30 years ago he did this thing. And he did a whole bunch of time for it. And now he's a different person. He was very much at peace with all this. He had totally forgiven himself. In my mind, I notice that I separate people who have done incredibly awful things once versus people who are serial offenders. I think that those two modes of existence do not have a lot to do with each other. And I was curious if he was a repeat offender, because a crime of a similar nature involving a victim with a comparable profile, similar milieu and location, had just taken place in Renton. And had he done this crime as well. People were talking. Bus drivers knew about his past now. This guys on the street were talking. Sleepers, everybody. Word was getting out. People talk. And I asked him, I said, Will, I'm going to ask you a question. You don't have to answer it. Don't answer this question. But I have to ask you because I have to know. And if you answer, please tell me a truthful answer out of respect of our friendship. It's not going to alter my estimation of you as a person and the memories we've had together. Did you do the Renton thing? Didn't even know what I was talking about. He did not do the Renton thing, and he was totally dismayed to learn that everyone thought he did. That all the guys on the bus who were sleeping, that all the operators. I told him I don't talk about his. I don't bring up his past when he's not around, but I hear other people, and this is the word on the street, and he was very disappointed. Going back to his this 1992 or 91, I'm not sure, incident. Um, this was during the early days of DNA testing. Will was convicted almost exclusively on DNA that placed him on the location of the incident. And because of the nature of the efficacy of DNA at that time, I am not prepared to believe that there's no reasonable doubt here. There was conflicting eyewitness testimony. The person best positioned to remember what the assailant looked like remembers a person with a different physical description. It's possible that Will did absolutely nothing wrong in 1992 and just got the really short end of the stick. This was during the days of Clinton following Reagan, the days of mandatory maximums, when they were trying to put as many people in jail as possible and keep them in there for as long as possible. I read the whole court case because I had this unhealthy fascination, obsession. I needed to know. This is my friend Will. But I didn't ask him if he had done the thing all those days, all those decades ago, because I didn't want to know the answer. And I don't think it matters. What's done is done. I wasn't even okay. I was alive, but I was scared. I asked him not to ride. He was hurt and disappointed when I pushed him away. Everybody was pushing him away. The word was getting out. Drivers knew. All these guys on the street. We were all of us repulsed. Doesn't matter who you are. This crime. It's just no. He was disappointed that I was on this bandwagon of unforgiveness as well. But I told him, Will, when you get on the bus, I start flashing. I'm starting to have all these disturbing memories of events I wasn't even at. I need some time to process. You got to understand, for you, Will, this is ancient history. You've had way too much time to process this, to reconcile and figure it out. For us, this is not ancient history for us. This is brand new information. We've just been made aware of this. We have no idea how to reconcile this news with you, Will, whom everybody likes. Everybody liked you. We all loved you. And I just need some time to process. He understood that. And we had this very poignant final conversation where he said, we had some good times, didn't we? And I said, the best times. You were my favorite passenger. There's no one else who rides my bus that I want to talk to for 4 hours. You've taught people how to think. I told him about that guy who was so moved by watching Will and I talking about Emily Dickinson. He loves that anecdote. And then he walked away into the night, and I didn't see him. And spent all this time driving buses alone. And the thing about trauma, speaking from my own experience, is that it's not overwhelmingly difficult while it's happening. It's just incredibly unpleasant. When you're in a moment of extreme fear, your brain is unable to make new memories. You just try to survive. It's mostly just reactive. Afterwards, that's when it gets tough. You are able to make new memories afterwards, and now you have to wrestle with how on earth are you supposed to accommodate your concept of a just universe such that it can include whatever it is you just went through. And I was going through a small version of that. And my big hang up was, how can I trust my intuition? If I can't trust this guy, the friendliest, safest seeming, etc. guy, who on earth can I believe is safe? All these people out here I would comfort myself thinking all these other people on the bus out here on the street who are more rude, more violent, less friendly, they have probably not done, they have definitely not done the horrendous thing that Will has done. And thinking that made me feel a little better. But was I really that inept? I don't like people staying on at the terminals on my bus, but sometimes I let him stay. And I'd sit across from him. He would be reading poetry or talking about something. We'd be talking about like Albert Einstein or Bruce Lee, whom he knew in his youth, actually. I'd be lying down on the seat across from him, listening to him talk, talking with him, because I felt so safe. I trusted this person, and what bothered me most is that I cannot trust my intuition. Your intuition is the amalgamation of every conscious thought and experience you've ever had, wrapped up into a ball of wisdom you can access instantly. Logic and reason are not particularly constructive when compared to the intense beauty of intuition. And if your intuition is shot, you've got nothing. These are the thoughts I was having. This is what was bothering me. What also bothered me is that I was judging him for his past rather than for who he is today. Rather than forgiving. Forgiveness is popular in the Western psyche because here we believe in second chances. In certain schools of Eastern thought, that is less the case. It's more like, instead, you're an adult. You're responsible for your own actions. You did this. Boom. That's part of who you are, isn't it? And because I'm Asian and American, I carry both of those ideas in me. And I was wrestling with them because they were existing in counterpoint to each other. But this guy has more than paid his dues. He sat in a prison cell for 23 years. And you have to remember, it's not just that the prime of his life was stolen from him. But also, when you come out of prison after 23 years and they have automatic transmissions and the internet and everyone's got a microwave, it's just, how are you supposed to function in this new world, let alone cell phones? But beyond that, because of his record, he's not allowed to work or rent or live indoors for the rest of his life. He has suffered mightily because of a single action he did when he was young. People should not be judged by the worst thing, only by the worst thing that they've done. A person's entire life shouldn't be a litany of fallout of a single action they performed in their youth. If all of us had to suffer that, every one of us would be in dire straits. Will is like me. He perceives life intrinsically as something to learn about. There's this thirst for learning. I often feel that living life is some sort of test or rehearsal for a great big exam that I'm going to have later. I don't know if that's a leftover from childhood that everyone possesses, or if it's something that only people who have made colossal mistakes in their life possess, because it's this desperate hunger, this struggle to understand, to comprehend life. I think we all have a bit of that. Like me, he also took pride in having interactions. He would tell me these very simple, small moments that he had just had, talking with a couple at the Martin Luther King Jr. statue, talking with some folks who traveled in from out of country at Pike Place, talking to a young kid at the library, steering that person's life in a gently healthier direction. It was endearing hearing these stories because they meant so much to him. There's this loneliness that he possessed that I possess that makes us want to reach out. Loneliness is the premier top of the pyramid emotion that all of us possess. all of us humans, and we possess it so much more than we ever let on. Um, Toward the end, he would share more about his time inside, that he could get along with everyone in prison, with all the toe the line with the toughest cats, as he would say. And the prison he was in was very full. There were 3 people per cell, and it would be you and 2 cellmates or cellies. And what him and his 2 cellies would do is they lived it up at the prison library, and they just devoured everything there, especially philosophy and literature. And what would happen is they would stay up all night. 2 of them would be engaging in Socratic dialogue, and the third would be writing it all down. And then they'd talk about it all together later. And talk about making the most of a situation, making the best of just an awful set of cards that you've been dealt. He took life as it comes and he made the best of it. Talking with him was like taking a 400 level course in life. And that's one of the reasons I liked interacting with him so much. After enough time driving buses around by myself thinking about all this, it occurred to me that I've made a terrible mistake in judging him and pushing him away. About a year and a half had gone by, and he showed up at the 49 terminal during the day. I don't think I'd ever seen him during the day. And he said, can I hang? Can I step on the bus? I said, yeah, come on in. And almost immediately I said something that I had been rehearsing in my head for a long time that I wanted to tell him, which is, it is wrong of me to judge someone for things they have done after they have recognized and rehabilitated themselves from it. It's a mistake to judge people, period, but especially this. It's a crime. It is not right for me to take people to task over something they've done after they've already improved themselves. I was falling victim to the fashion of cancel culture, which my generation loves, which requires people to be morally upright for every instant of their entire lives according to standards that didn't even exist when they were younger. I have a problem with that. There's an ethical hypocrisy there, but what's worst about cancel culture is that it's predicated entirely on the premise that people cannot grow. It requires you to believe that people cannot improve. And I happen to know from experience that that is not true. And Will is one of the best examples of that. My intuition was right the whole time. I felt and believed that he was good because he is good. Never mind who he was 3 decades ago. I felt that he was safe and trustworthy, comfortable to be around because he was safe. He is safe and trustworthy. He, on one of the most recent times I saw him, he defended me to this unstable, angry person who was mad at me. He defended me and interceded on my behalf when he didn't have to. I felt so forgiven in that moment. I hope he feels similarly forgiven from me. He doesn't need my forgiveness, but I hope he recognizes that I can see now. I now understand what he was saying about his eye. That's not the real eye. He's taught me things that I couldn't see before, and he's shown me the error of my ways and taught me the difference between looking and seeing. Yeah. Thanks for listening to this. All right.